I'm Austinlugo.
I'm Andrew Harp.
This is Nothing to Say.
Let's talk about Robocop. Today we're talking about the 1987 Paul Verhoeven directed movie Robocop. We wanted to pick an action movie.
Mm-hmm.
I got to pick. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. I loved it. This may be the third or fourth time I've seen it. But Austin, I gotta ask, I guess can you sum up, what the plot of the movie sort of is?
The plot of the movie is it's this futuristic dystopian Detroit where pretty much the entire city is run by this corporation. Almost all public facilities, including now the police department, is run by this, big capitalistic corporation. And now that they are under the ownership of this corporation, they're trying to make as money as fast as they can. So there are basically two prototypes that are built. There's this robot type thing that's built by this guy named Jones, which just like murders. It's basically just like machine guns on like a. It's kind of similar. Yeah.
We'll get to that scene. Yeah, it's like a mech unit, metal
Yes.
gear type thing with metal, with like, yeah, it's like, yeah.
And the other option that they build is what's called a Robocop, which is basically a cyborg, half man, half cop. And we follow this man who is brutally murdered, but through the amazing uh, faculties of science is turned into Robocop, who goes on a tear to revenge his own death.
Yes, sir. You basically summed it up. Um, yeah, like you said, uh, in a dystopian future, Detroit takes place in Detroit. The movie, I believe, was actually primarily filmed not in Detroit. Do you know uh, where it was filmed?
Mm-mm.
Entirely, it was entirely filmed in Dallas, Texas. Because I think, like, yeah, they wanted to film in Detroit, but they didn't like the architecture and buildings there. They didn't like very much.
Mm-hmm.
But and I think it was going to be expensive to film there too. So Dallas was like one of their like several options that they thought of, and they decided
Yeah.
to go with Dallas. Yeah, but yeah, like you said, like a dystopian future. It almost kind of feels like the 80s or like the 90s if it was even more technologically advanced to where
Mm-hmm.
like robots are crazy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Sorry. And yeah, it's I love this movie. Paul Verhoeven, Dutch director. Two other great movies by him: Total Recall and Starship Troopers. I know you're not a huge fan of Total Recall. I know you liked it, but I loved it.
Yeah.
And Starship Troopers was the one he came out in the '90s, like the late '90s. Also really good. Kind of the same thing, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but like his movies have kind of like a weird sense of humor. They're very violent, like very unapologetically violent, um, on many different levels. And yeah, I love it. Um, but yeah, I digress. The movie, it starts out with just you're coming in on not Dallas. I guess it's Dallas, Detroit. I don't know what that shot is, Detroit or Dallas. But yeah, it's like boom, RoboCop, ching, RoboCop. It's so bad. It's a bad, most badass movie ever. And then you're just basically given right up from the beginning, kind of like sets up kind of like the tone of the world at the
Mm-hmm.
time. These like news reports, these news anchors, which is really really good. Um, the new stuff, which are kind of intermittent here and there, like the
Yeah.
commercials and stuff. I believe those were added after the fact. So I think like when they presented this to the MPAA, the movie,
Interesting.
it was a little bit different. I think they were concerned with a lot of the violence. So I think those segments were added in kind of like in post or, kind of, I
Yeah.
guess, after filming, or I guess you could say.
Yeah. That's that's really interesting because I think those sort of news scenes, first of all, I think those kind of news and also because it's strange, he's very good at world building. I mean, you see this in Total Recall too. It's incredible world building, and both in the news sequences and also the commercials that he has are
Yeah,
just so weird and incredible. And I really think it ties the whole thing together. And by starting with a news story, I think creates this very specific tone in a way that if you had just started with, say, your introduction of our protagonist, I don't think you would get that in nearly the same sense.
I love it. I love it because yeah, in the news sequence, they're just kind of like, yeah, a nuclear threat in South Africa today. Also, the president was up into space today and kind of jumping around. You know what I mean? It's kind of like that dichotomy of news, and then they play an ad. Where they mean where they're like, they play an ad that's like the heart one.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, we'll get you a new heart. Da, 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 da. It's yeah, it's very funny, but yeah, it's effective at building kind of like the world at the time in
Mm-hmm.
Detroit and the world.
And that's also where we get our introduction to the sort of violence on both the citizens and the police officers, because I believe it's in that news like section that they say that 3 cops were recently murdered, which kind of plays into what the plot is like in the next scene.
Yep. I believe the next scene is wait, shit. I'm trying to think what happens after the do sequence. I just saw this movie last night.
Well, isn't that when we get introduced to Murphy? Like he comes into the station.
Yes, that's it. Yep. Yep. He comes into the station, precinct, Detroit Police Precinct. Um, he uh, I'm trying to think. Yeah, he comes into the police precinct, and more or less, the police precinct is kind of like in disarray. Kind of, like cops are very upset
Mm-hmm.
because I think just the conditions are really bad. They're getting killed very easily out there. I think they feel like something's wrong, and they threaten to strike. And the police chief, he's funny. He's just like, no, cops don't strike. We're not striking. And Peter Weller, he's just coming from another precinct, and I think he goes there and he's like, the guy's like, oh, where other precinct are you from? Oh, I'm from South Precinct. Well, welcome to hell, or something like that. And I think they're in the West Precinct or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, welcome to hell. So it's like really, really bad. There's like fighting in the station, yelling. They come in, they go into the locker room, and the chief of police like gets the stuff out of a cop's locker because he was killed. It's just kind of in disarray, and people don't know what to do. But Peter Weller, the point is like Peter Weller is now working at the precinct, and he seems like a cool guy. Which
Yeah.
I'd say Peter Weller. Peter Weller, of course, is the actor who
Yeah.
plays Alex Murphy, the
Yeah.
character, who is very good, by the way.
Yes. It is a absolutely incredible performance, especially because I mean we'll get into this later, but through a lot of the film you don't see much of his face. It's really just like his jaw basically, and the amount of emotion you can get he gets out of, what little you see is really it's absolutely it actually reminds me a bit of the Mandalorian, even though you can see a little bit more of his face in this, in that a lot of the acting has to come through like his physical movement. And this is even more challenging in this film because I remember reading that like the suit that he had to wear for like
Yeah,
Robocop was like very stiff, and it was
yeah,
very hard to like move around. And so the
uh,
fact that he got that much emotion out of it is really just a nod to the incredible performance that I think it has gone a bit underrated.
yeah, yeah. He gets the suit later, but yeah, I totally agree with you. He he hasn't gotten the suit yet, but yeah, we'll
Mhm.
talk more about the suit. But yeah, I believe when the suit is like hot, it's bad. He can barely move into it, and I think what he did was well, I think he was having like basically like nervous breakdowns about it, and I think he had to contact his like acting teacher, and like she was able to kind of tell him like, okay, this is what you'll do, and yeah, he is great. And like you said about the face thing, I think they went through a lot of different actors because you know, you have to cover your face for a long time for
Yeah.
actors, their face is their brand, so but yeah, but we'll talk definitely about kind of like the suit and stuff like that. And um yeah, but and I think the scene at the precinct just basically ends that Alex Murphy has a new partner, Anna Lewis, who's, she beat up someone in there, so she's a tough person or
Mhm.
whatever.
It has some like the culture of the police department reminds me a lot of Aliens, or a lot of James Cameron's films actually, or just kind of in the way the police officers interact with each other.
Yes, Alien and Aliens. I would also say in Starship Troopers, which is another Verhoeven movie, they kind of act like that too. Like they're like all the men and women are like in the locker room together, which is
Hmm.
interesting. Like they're changing in there, and the same thing in Starship Troopers. They like all shower together, not because just cause, which is kind of weird detail. It's not really weird. It's just kind of like, I don't know. I like to think Paul Verhoeven is just kind of like, yeah, in the future they just do it all together, I guess. Why, like, and also it's also probably like more of like a convenience thing too, where it's kind of like, you hang out in the locker room, you're talking in the locker room. There can't be two separate locker rooms. We just need one. It's just like, why have two? Like I want it to be like a diverse cast, and so
Hmm.
I kind of makes sense from a filmmaking point of view.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So
you're right.
yeah.
Definitely like the camaraderie between the cops and stuff, really good.
So at this point, we are introduced to the corporation, correct?
Yes, they're having their executive meeting.
And there's Dick Jones, who's like this old, longtime employee of the company, who's like basically he's number two at this giant corporation. And then there's this kind of go-getter young guy whose name is something.
Have to see. Well, it's played by Miguel Ferrer, who's great.
Yes,
Bob Morton.
Bob Morton. And so basically, Bob Morton wants the number two position. He's kind of like, he's one of those people who'll do anything to get to the top. He's hungry, he's ambitious, he's willing to do whatever it takes.
Yeah,
And they have this board meeting, and you can see that Bob Morton is like just kind of like, playing it cool, kind of like blowing it off, like trying not to care.
yeah.
And and Dick Jones presents what this project that he's been working on for a long time, which, as we were talking about earlier, is this giant mech suit, which is
Yeah,
it's
it's the ED 209.
mhm.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, I guess like because they do use stop motion for this, it is a little because they use like stop motion and rear projection. It
Mhm.
is like a little wonky, but I still think that, especially for I think the special effects in this are really good, and I think the suit is quite believable, even though like it does look like at points, especially if it's like a short shot, just a little. It's kind of like in Jaws. Like if you look at the shark too long, you can be like, yeah, it looks a little wonky, but I think they play off something that's really incredible too. And right, they obviously built an actual mech suit whenever it's not moving, so I think that design is just
Mhm.
incredible. And Dick Jones presents this to his boss and the entire board, and he hands a gun to one of the employees.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah. He's like, also before they bring out the ED 209, Dick also basically says, OCP, we make military weapons, we control the cops, we do, what I mean? It's just, they're also setting up the fact that like OCP, Omni Consumer Products, is just gigantic, and they own everything, and they make all kinds of stuff. They make weapons, and it's just like a shitty company.
Yeah.
Yeah, he talks to this executive, and he's like, "Okay, use your gun in a threatening manner." He points at Dick Jones. He's like, "No, point it at ED2 on it," and he does. And then Robot's like, "Okay, you have 20 seconds to put down your gun." They're like, "Oh, okay." And he like throws it down. The ED209 ignores him. I love that too. I love like the scene where behind ED209 is all those scientists,
Uh-huh.
when he throws down the gun, and the robot's like, "Okay, you have 15 seconds." And the scientists are like freaking out. They're like trying to rip out wires and like throwing stuff around, and everyone's like, what's going on?" Like, and then yeah, so just like yeah, he counts down and he blows the executive to smithereens. It just because he's got these big two machine guns on his arm.
Yeah.
And just like I'm telling you, it's like a million squibs. It's like 500 squibs just like bursting out of this actor, like right away. And
Mhm.
I kind of forgot like how I kind of forgot the background of that scene, but I think it was like I think it was only one. I think it was one shot. I mean, it had to be. It was so many squibs, coming
Yeah.
out of the sky. But yeah, this thing, the ED-209 just basically viscerally murders this executive, which is an amazing scene. And the where did you watch this on?
I watched it on Hulu.
Okay, I watched it on there too. I believe that's a theatrical cut. I think in the unrated or director's cut or whatever, that scene is much longer. It's several seconds longer of him getting shot at,
Of course it is.
which sounds great. But yeah, but you get the idea for the most part, the theatrical cut.
And so obviously the president or owner of the corporation is not excited about this. It's funny because like a lot of the board, like some of the boards, like pretty, like terrified, but a lot of them are just like, this shit happens.
Yeah,
and and you can see from like Dick Jones' point of view, he doesn't give a shit at all. He's just like, oh, we're gonna go into production. But the owner of the company, the CEO, whatever, it's
he's angry.
like, yeah, he's angry, which, understandably, they just murdered somebody.
Yeah,
And we should also mention that they're building a new Detroit, as they call it, which is basically they're rebuilding all of Detroit.
I forget what it's called. It's called like Delta City.
Delta City, that's right. And so that's like their main goal. And so he's just kind of pissed off because this is like setting their new Delta back, because the idea is that old Detroit is like full of crime, and the only way to stop the crime is to basically just constantly be paroling the streets.
I think Dick Jones, when he was introducing ED-209, he said that it's going to be used for urban pacification. The writing is so good. Like that kind of stuff is just like, who would have thought of that? Like it's
Mhm.
so good. Like
So Bob Morton swings in at this point, and he's like, "Hey, we've been working on this project for a while called Robocop. You know, can we do this instead?" And the CEO is like, "Yeah, give me a presentation in like 20 minutes." And you can see like Dick Jones is just pissed off because he basically just had this project he's been working on for a long time stolen by this like young ambitious guy, and he's pissed.
yep, and that's I think he said like prototype in 6 months or something like that too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, RoboCop. And so so Alex and Anne,
Mm-hmm.
they're out and about. They're just working. And they get a call about like a robbery. So they head right over there. It's also established in the conversation too. One thing too, I got to say about RoboCop: every scene purposeful, and
Mm-hmm.
like every scene is purposeful and it works. There's no scene that I could point at and be like, yeah, if you remove that, it would make the movie better. For the most part, I would say like every scene is just like has something in it that just completely makes sense and carries on throughout the rest of the movie. So he's like talking with Anne, remember, and they're having coffee, and he like flips his gun around, like he
Mm-hmm.
he's like, yeah, like my son, like he watches the show, and the guy in it, he flips his gun around, and I want to do it for him as well, and he likes it. And she's like, oh, okay. And they get the call about like a robbery, and you cut to the robbers, which are basically the bad guys of the movie, in a van driving down the road.
And it's also established at this point that it's the bad guys is led by this man who basically runs all of old Detroit. He's like this big mob boss,
Yeah,
and while they're in the van, he's like freaking out because they just robbed this bank, but they blew the door up, so all of the money is burned and basically
yeah.
entirely useless.
He's like mad. Yeah, that's of course is Clarence Boddicker, played by Kurtwood Smith, who's very
Mhm.
good. Remember him as Red Foreman in that '70s show, of
Yeah.
course. He's so good in this movie. He's so evil. He's very, very good. Yeah, but yeah, he's like angry at the guy because they like burned all the money. He's yelling. He's so good when he's yelling and stuff. But yeah, while they're arguing, Murphy and Lewis come up from behind, ready to shoot at them,
Hmm.
and they get into kind of like a firefight.
Yeah. And so they start shooting back and forth, and there's a little bit of, the Murphy like drives to the side, and there's some like couple of stunts done, shooting going back and forth, and one of the bad guys gets shot in like the leg or the arm, like not a fatal wound by any means.
It's the guy who messed up. He burned the money.
Yeah, And so Clarence grabs him and throws him onto the police car.
Yeah, he's crazy. Yeah.
And of course, when the body hits the police car, uh, Murphy and Anne have to like pull over because although they don't actually stop for this guy who's, just been thrown onto a car and is kind of,
You gotta
you know,
get the leader. Yeah,
I guess.
they just drive away. Whatever.
And so they continue to chase the van to what is like basically this big warehouse.
It's like an abandoned steel factory or steel mill.
And so the two of them get out of the car and they're off to find them, and they kind of split up, and they have these cool like headset things. They're like these helmets, and they have these little like I don't know, like it's basically like a walkie-talkie, but it's like attached to your like headset. And
Yeah.
they decide to go different directions, and so we follow Anne. This Emily was watching this movie with me, and she she walks up to this black guy who is peeing.
He's one of the gang. He's one of the gang members.
He's one of the gang members. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's one of the bad guys. And I'll say this first. What's interesting about him is, did you notice that he's like dressed like a Black Panther?
Yeah, I think I didn't really like make that connection, but I obviously remember what he looked like, and
Yeah,
he's got like the hat and stuff. Yeah, yeah. He's I think Black Panther wore more black clothing. He's just like kind of like an army green though.
Yeah, yeah. And so she's like, put your hands up, and
Yeah.
he
Mind if I put this away?
yeah, which but it's and and she looks down at his,
Yeah,
and
because
because it's out.
Yeah.
And when she looks down, he basically kicks her gun away and pushes her off this big. They're on like
They're like on a ledge or something.
on like a ledge or something, and she falls onto like a pile of flour or something soft that doesn't like it.
Yeah.
She's in pain, she's clearly like hurt herself, but she's not like, she didn't break her neck or anything.
Yeah.
And so while this is going on,
You were saying you saw this with Emily.
yeah, because she saw that scene and she thought it was just like, why would she look down at his she asked like, why is she look down? I'm like, I don't know.
It's a good question. Whatever. It's like, they're like, okay, in this scene, how is she incapacitated? Like,
Yeah.
how is she defeated? I guess, it's just, yeah, it's there are things in this movie that are very strange.
Yeah.
Same thing with Total Recall, where it's like, it's almost hard to describe why people say or do certain things. In Robocop, there are some moments that are just kind of like, okay, why did he do that? But it's like little things that don't necessarily, they don't ruin the movie or anything like that. In fact, they probably give it a little bit more personality.
Yeah. It feels quirky more than anything. Like, it doesn't really feel like a mistake as much as it just feels like kind of quirky, just kind of weird.
Yeah.
And so while this is going on, Murphy he's trying to, he's walking around the building with his gun in hand, and there's these two guys sitting in front watching this TV show that actually plays through the whole movie.
That's another quirky thing that they add that is so funny. It's this horrible sitcom that everyone watches in the movie.
It's like this nearly pornographic TV sitcom thing about this man and
I don't even know what it's about.
I don't know.
It doesn't matter because it's just like, it's like you said, it's like a trashy show about like it's like, and there's like models in it, and there's like this old guy, and then something happens, and then he says the catchphrase, like, do you remember what it was?
Something about $1.
He said, "I buy that for $1."
I buy that for $1.
And like there are several scenes where they're watching the show, like different people in the show watch it and they like freak out, like they laugh so hard when he says that. I'm guessing that's just like, he's just Paul Verhoeven. I think like when I think of Robocop, by the way, I think of like Paul Verhoeven kind of making fun of like big action movies like this that were being made at the time. So like I like to think that like I don't think he thinks that they're stupid or dumb, but I think like he kind of likes to. I think in RoboCop he tries to kind of like play it off to a very exaggerated angle, and I think like the sitcom kind of almost shows like I think he's supposed to. I think with the sitcom he's trying to show, I guess, like a degradation of like entertainment or something like that
Yeah.
for people. Like they love watching the sitcom, but there's like it's just like it's just bad. I think it's like not only in this dystopian future is like people are poor and people are getting killed and there's violence and stuff, but also just like the things that like we use to like I guess distract ourselves from everything
Mhm.
um, are awful. Like they have like no there's nothing redeemable about it.
Yeah.
So it's super funny.
And so these two bad guys are watching the show, and that's when Murphy comes in. They grab their guns. One of the bad guys is immediately shot.
Hmm.
Uh, the second guy is pretty quick on the trigger, and come to find out, basically the entire bad guy group has surrounded Murphy. So there's like 10 guns on him,
Yeah.
and at this point, it's very clear that he's not going to be able to shoot his way out. This isn't like this isn't a fistful of dollars. This isn't Clint Eastwood and or John Wayne. Like this isn't that kind of movie.
Done. Yep.
And so they surround him, and it basically looks dire for him. And they start beating him up pretty brutally. They're pretty cruel.
They shoot his limbs off.
Yeah, and they start shooting his limbs off, which is again another amazing prosthetic and use of just like when they shoot his arm off, it looks so real. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, they shoot his hand off, they shoot his arm off, like it's just super duper good. They shoot him with a bunch of shotguns, and one thing I'd noticed that I never noticed this before. I don't know how I didn't, but it looks like they use like a model or something for when they shoot him in the head, right? Because Peter Weller, he's like crying out,
Right.
and he's like and it kind of the camera is like here, and then it kind of angles behind him, and then he gets shot in the head, and you see it kind of like go out of his head, and I think
Yeah.
is not Peter Weller. I think it might be like a doll or something, that which I never noticed that before. I didn't
Yeah.
notice that, like, because yeah, when you look at the face, you're like, he's just kind of like one. It's kind of just stuck at one face. It looks, but it's not bad looking because obviously I've seen this movie several times and I never noticed that,
Yeah.
like that was like a doll that they made to make look like Peter Weller, so they could
Mhm.
have like something that they can basically just shoot through the head.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that scene is very violent. And once again, like I think the MPAA had some problems with the movie, and of course that scene was also. I think like yeah, I think the unrated version is longer and there's
Yeah.
more stuff. But yeah, in the theatrical version, they had to cut it a little bit.
Still very violent though. And all this Anne actually witnesses this murder because she's like,
Yeah.
she's trying to save him, but because of her back, and she's like kind of crawling away. And they basically brutally murder him, and they get away, and she's there with him, who at this point is still alive, like he's still breathing, which is just it made Emily laugh. Yeah, because he's been shot like 50 times, including in the head, but he's not dead. And we cut to the hospital, which is another incredible scene. And it's almost for like the next, I would say like 5 to 10 minutes, it's almost all told from his perspective. Like it's almost all POV shots.
Yeah. So yeah, like you said, he goes to the hospital and he's remembering. He's basically just what a dying man would probably think of: his family, his kid, his wife. Um, and then yeah, it goes black. The screen goes black, and I believe Paul Verhoeven wanted the blackness to last for like 20 seconds or something. It's like, okay, Uh, but yeah, like you said, he kind of powers up, and he is now basically being worked on as RoboCop, and it's like you said, it's from the perspective of him basically being a RoboCop cyborg sitting in a lab while they kind of like work on him and stuff like that. Brilliant, amazing how they did that. Because yeah, you don't. It's simple.
Mhm.
You basically film from one angle the entire time. but you learn a lot about Robocop and like how people are working on him and stuff like that. Very good.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a really intriguing scene. It's really well blocked. All the staging is really well done. And what's interesting is instead of just being like one shot, just like basically just like a exposition for like 5 minutes where they explain everything. It's a series of like these really short moments. It'll be like, one short scene here, one, and it's clear that's he's being worked on for like, multiple months. So like
Mhm.
it'll be like, the first shot and they're first working on him and they'll go black, and then it's like a couple months later, and it's New Year's, and it's a couple months later, and they're like presenting him to people. And I think it's really incredible the way they kind of use time dilation and a series of short scenes without like it never I think one of the things the director does really well in all of the films I've seen of his is he's really incredible at creating exposition without ever explaining anything. And I think in this, like, it's very easy for this to become expository, especially at this moment, like explaining who Robocop is, what he does, right, what his directives are, as you kind of see, not too far later. But he's able to do it in a way that it never feels like, it always feels like, because so often in movies, especially when they're sci-fi films, you'll have moments where like a scientist is explaining something to another scientist that clearly both scientists should already like they know, like they already know what's going on, and it feels like it's being told only for the audience, and it doesn't feel interesting. But in this, all the conversations feel very real, and it feels very much like this is an actual conversation that they would have. Like it doesn't feel like you're ever being explained, like nothing's ever being explained to you, which I think is just incredibly challenging thing to do, especially in a film like this where the world is so weird and strange and RoboCop has such like unique talents.
I think somebody said that like RoboCop. It's like it's I love it because it's a movie for the dumbest person in the room, but it's also a movie for the smartest person in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, you can look at it as just kind of like a dumb robot guy who looks awesome. He's got a gun and shoots people. Or you could like dig a little deeper about kind of like the dystopian world, war and violence, humanity, capitalism. It's all there. It's all very clear too. It's nothing that you really have to like dig too far for. It's very very clear, but I think any kind of all kinds of different people can appreciate it.
And so after we get to introduce to who RoboCop is, which again, it's also interesting that the director takes quite a while to kind of reveal RoboCop's look, which is just actually the first time you see it is you're in RoboCop's perspective, and he's walking like through this lab, and in the background you see like a monitor, and you can kind of like see just like a really quick glance of what he looks like, which is also really interesting. And then they go to the police department
Yeah.
where everyone's kind of like freaking out because they're like, who is this, like,
What
they
is
have,
this?
yeah,
Yeah.
what is this thing, what's going on? And you can see that the officer in charge is, he's trying to have control of his department, but it's clear that the corporation kind of just does whatever they want. They don't like they see themselves as the boss, even though the police officers don't really see them as the boss.
Yeah, they're not. The police officers are the one actually like in the community, I guess, trying to do some policing,
Mhm.
whatever. But yeah, and the corporation just do what we say.
Yeah. And so they go into the police department and they put him in like this like glass room almost, or like
It's
that,
it's like a cage.
like a cage almost. It's basically a place to like keep him and like for him to sleep and like charge or whatever. And they
And
show
eat.
like, yeah, and they show him like that he eats like baby food. And there's this weird moment where one of the executives, he gets some of the baby food and he just like starts chowing down on it.
He's like, help yourself. Miguel Ferreira, yeah, that
Yeah.
that that guy, yeah, the guy who eats baby food, he's really funny. He has like a lot of funny reactions throughout the movie. It's weird. That guy, I've heard that guy is the most consistent character across all three RoboCop movies. For some reason, he's in all three of them. Peter Weller, he's not even in the third movie. He's in the first and second movie. Peter Weller doesn't play RoboCop in the third movie.
But that guy's there.
That guy's there, yeah, for some reason. He's funny. So he has a lot of funny reactions to things.
Yeah. And so this is kind of where we get the gun range, and you can see them all like shooting. They're all at the like at this gun range, we're all shooting guns, and of course, RoboCop is at the end
He's
with
got a
just
giant gun.
he's got a giant gun, perfect shot, right? Just like he's shooting like I don't know. So Emily actually asked this. She asked, "Is he using a submachine gun, or is he just moving his finger so quickly that he can just pull off?" I don't know. You never actually see him load in the movie either, which is, I mean, it's fine. You just never see like they just have infinite bullets.
He's cool. He's RoboCop. He's also one thing I will say too. We're also earlier introduced to the Prime directives.
Yes.
Serve the public trust, protect the innocent, and uphold the law. And there's
Mhm.
also a fourth classified directive that we didn't
Directive.
know about.
That's right.
Yeah, he's awesome. He shoots all the targets. He's amazing.
And then when he puts his gun away, he does the little spin thing,
Yeah,
right? The little thing he did earlier in the movie, showing that Murphy is still somewhere, like inside, like even though
very
uh,
subtly.
very subtle, yeah. And he puts it in like his leg, which is cool. I think that's a really cool.
Yeah. So yeah, the design of the suit, it's a little awkward.
Yeah,
It's not one of those kind of like movie things it's creative in that like it's completely create like it's completely like I guess unique creation. So it's like kind of weird, but it's just perfect. Like the design of the suit is great. And like you said, Peter Weller pretty much just like moves like this the whole time.
yeah,
But like you said, he's able to exude so much just energy and emotion out of it. Even though he talks like a robot for most of the movie, he moves like a robot, like
yeah.
most of the movie. Like it doesn't even matter because he's just able to do it so well, and it's super impressive. And yeah, the suit, the design of it, the way that it looks, the way that it functions, very, just very, very good. And then he goes on he goes out, he leaves.
Yes, and I actually want to talk about this for I remember. So the scene where they throw the keys and he catches them, that
Yeah,
actually took over 100. It's actually one of the most takes for any single scene because he couldn't move his head, so he could never see the keys. So they actually spent 4 days shooting this one shot where he just catches the keys, and they refused to like just have him grab the keys. They refused. The director was like, "No, he has to catch them," and so they spent. And Murphy, or the actor who plays Murphy, uh, Peter, um,
Peter Weller.
yeah, Peter Weller, just got like so pissed off because he's just like, "This is a giant waste of time," and
Yeah.
he refused. Or like the director refused to not shoot the scene, so he spent days just like him walking in the shot, and it's like a 2 second shot. It's very short. It's just him like catching the keys.
Not much. Yeah. I think I'm remembering that now. I think I'm remembering that a little bit now. I think that might have been like, yeah, one of the first scenes that they shot with the suit as well.
Yeah,
And I think even there was a point where Peter Weller was so frustrated with like the suit and working with Verhoeven that I think he quit for a minute. But then I think they had to mend the relationship and they got back on it. So yeah, he was. I think yeah, they had kind of like a weird kind of they had a tough relationship just because like yeah, Verhoeven was asking for a lot, but it was a lot for Peter Weller to I guess do.
yeah,
Um, but once again, everyone did a good job, I think. And yeah, he catches the keys. He goes in his car. Once again, there's another little thing too. When Peter Weller drives out of the police station, the car like kind of hits like kind of like the
yeah.
edge of the slope, and the same thing happens with RoboCop. Oh, just oh, it's just so simple. It's just so it's so satisfying to watch.
Mhm. Absolutely. And so we cut to this robbery that's taking place in like a gas station, I think, or like convenience store, something like that. And of course, again, the people at the convenience store are watching the same sitcom. And
So good.
and this guy like comes in, he grabs like a magazine. He comes to the front and he says, "Give me all the money in your cash register." They're like, "Oh, okay, okay." And they're like, "Give us the money in the safe too." He's like, "Oh, we don't have a safe." And of course, behind this can of beers is this giant safe full of money for some reason. I
Yeah,
don't know.
beer.
And so they start opening the safe, and in comes RoboCop, and he just like beats him up. I mean, he just like he's
Destroys him. The guy has like a machine gun, and he's like, "Oh fuck me!" Like he sees RoboCop come in, and he's like freaking out, right? Like because he sees RoboCop, and he's like, "Fuck me!" And he's like shooting it at him, and he just like throws him into a fridge. Just like that shot of like him getting thrown into
yeah,
the fridge is It's so funny because like there's like garbage. It's so good.
And I think one of my problems with this film, and I think this is the first moment you kind of see this, is the fact that Robocop is kind of invincible, which is, I mean, again, incredible performances. I love a lot of the world building, but I think this is one of the things, especially later in the film, that this kind of it lowered the stakes a bit. Is like, this guy shoots a machine gun at him, and he just like stands there, and he's just like this. I get that, like, it's kind of similar to, I was reminded a bit again of the Terminator, in the sense that Arnold Schwarzenegger's character in both the first one and the second one is this, well, I would say more so in the first. In the second, he's a little bit more vulnerable. Is this almost, menacing, almost impossible to beat thing, which makes the fights, especially at the beginning, sort of. I mean, I get that it like shows, how incredibly powerful RoboCop is, but I think in a certain sense, it lowers the stakes because just like, he can just walk around being shot at by hundreds of bullets and basically nothing happens.
Yeah, that I have the same problem with the movie too. If there's one bad thing, if there's one problem I have with that, is it, yeah, the fact that RoboCop, there's not a lot of tension with RoboCop for the most part throughout the movie, because he is so awesome. He's so great. He's so invincible that, yeah, like him as a hero, like you said, he's not very vulnerable, so there's not a lot of tension, because he is so indestructible and just so effective and efficient, which adds to the character, of course, of the idea of RoboCop and the fact that he is so awesome. But yeah, if there's definitely like, I guess maybe one criticism I have of the movie in one way or another, it is that for sure. I
Yeah.
agree with you.
And so he throws the bad guy into the fridge and then just leaves, which is an
Thank
interesting
you. He's like,
definition.
good night.
Interesting definition of protecting the public, because he
Just,
doesn't arrest anybody. Like, he never really arrests anybody. He just kind of
he
either
kind of tries to arrest people, but for some reason, yeah, he doesn't book that guy.
yeah.
Whatever. I don't know.
And so then the next scene is uh, basically a rape is about to take place. It's two men, harassing this woman.
With he's right next to the Delta City.
Yes. Which is incredible. Delta City signs right above it. And RoboCop comes in, and the guy's like got a knife, and he's like, "Oh, move."
Like, yeah, I'm gonna get her. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you can see like his targeting system, and he shoots through her dress and basically shoots his genitals. He basically shoots.
He shoots like you said, through her dress and also like through her legs in the jet, and she's totally fine.
Yeah.
And she's like kind of confused. She's like, "What?" And yeah, the guy like got shot in the and then yeah, she goes over to RoboCop. She's like, "Oh my God, thank you so much. You saved me." Da, 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 da. It's like, "Ma'am, you have like experienced a horrible like a horrible violent act. I will call a rape crisis center."
I love that. I love that moment.
That's so good. Yeah, it's just so, and she's like confused. She's like, "Okay," and then just ends. That's it. Like, and then I think the next scene too. This is basically just like basically the point of all these scenes is just to show how awesome RoboCop is and how everyone is just like kind of just okay, yeah, he's awesome. Like he's just effective. Like there's nothing wrong with him in terms of what he's supposed to do. Um, and I think like yeah, the next thing he goes to this city hall, where a councilman, Detroit councilman, has the mayor and other workers hostage because he wasn't reelected. And there's like a SWAT people there, and they're like, yeah, we're trying to figure it out. Like they're talking the news, and I love it too. Like he's like talking to him about like, yeah, what we're gonna do with the guy. RoboCop comes up, and the guy and the person interviewing him is like, okay, I don't know, he just like runs away because it's like it's RoboCop, and yeah, RoboCop just like walks in the city hall building.
I love that scene because like they've built like the SWAT team's like built this barricade, and they have these like really complicated like tactics going on, like negotiation tactics.
Yeah. RoboCop's like, I'm just gonna walk in.
RoboCop just like drives right through the barricade, just like right through the middle, just like steps out of the car.
That is so funny. That is like yes, that is so funny. Where it's just kind of like RoboCop just like kind of like pushes through the barricade, like what? That's so like yeah, this is one of the funniest movies. It's so good. Yeah, he just like he gets up, he doesn't say anything. He just like walks into City Hall. And yeah, the councilman's like freaking out. He's like, I want this, I want that, and I want this. And the guy on the ground is trying to talk to him. And he's like, I'll kill them. Da, 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 da. And yeah, RoboCop comes in and he's able to. The guy, I guess, doesn't notice that Robocop walks in,
Mhm.
and he
Well, he's behind a wall.
right,
There's like a wall between them.
yeah, and he's using his infrared technology. You know, that infrared technology, very interesting. That isn't like an effect. Those are like people wearing bodysuits.
Wait, what do you mean?
So you know how everybody has like the infrared thing on
Yeah.
them?
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
are actors wearing bodysuits.
Really?
Yeah, I believe it is. Yeah,
That's
like
incredible.
it's not like an effect. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like an infrared effect that they put on people.
Right,
Like they
right, right.
or like they kind of changed the lighting or whatever. They just basically just like filmed like shots that looked like infrared with like people wearing bodysuits and stuff like that.
That's incredible. I
I
would
know
have never guessed that.
it looks really good. Yeah, when you kind
Yeah.
of look at it, you can kind of almost see like the curve of people's bodies. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like as if they are wearing one. When you
Uh-huh.
but but of course, if you're not told that, you
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, RoboCop, he punches through the wall, he beats him up, throws him out the window, and he saves the day. He saves the mayor of Detroit. Uh, and I think yeah, after that, it's just you get like news footage and stuff. Like
Yeah.
once again,
RoboCop's like he's like around like a bunch of he's like visiting an elementary school for some reason.
that's so funny too. Yeah, he's playing with little kids.
And these little kids are just like adoring, they're like, oh, it's like a cool robot guy. And he gives like your classic like after school kind of speech in his
Stay out of trouble. Stay out of trouble. But another good a news sequence. I think the ad in that one was the Nukem board game, which was funny.
I love that. Actually, you know, I was watching this movie and I talked about earlier how much I love the like commercials in the news, and I would be incredibly interested. I guess it's too late now, but I would have watched a television show that was just like these news anchors and their commercials because it actually. Have you ever seen The Act of Flyness? It's on HBO. It's just absolutely incredible. It's only one season. It's like 6 or 8 episodes, and they do this thing in a lot of the episodes where like it'll almost play like this weird dark sitcom, and they'll have these like really weird commercials in it, and it reminded me a lot of that. And I would love to just see like an entire a television show that's just the news anchors or just the commercials, because they're so inventive and silly and incredibly weird and strange, and I just love it.
Yeah, like the commercials that they play in the
Mhm.
movie are really
Yeah.
not much different than ones you might see in like a regular sketch show or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, they're funny. Yeah, the Nukem one is funny. It's just like, like the family arguing, like Pakistan is encroaching on my border. That's so funny. Yeah, and yeah, they're basically setting up with a news sequence that like, yeah, RoboCop is popular. People like him a lot.
Mhm.
Then I think you get the bathroom scene with Bob Morton,
Yes.
which is another just amazing scene. I cannot believe like this scene is so weird. Like it doesn't have to be weird though, but it is. And it's great.
Yeah. So Bob Morton's basically just bragging to his friend, how incredible he is,
Yeah,
and
he's right.
how
Like he's like, yeah,
yeah,
RoboCop's awesome.
he's just been moved up to like some high position. He's just been promoted, and he's basically telling his friend, how like stupid Dick Jones is, and how Dick Jones doesn't know anything, and of course, and they're peeing at this time, and out of the bathroom walks, or like out of a stall
Yeah,
walks Dick Jones, and everyone just like runs out of the bathroom, including the guy that's staying next to him, which is he like zips up his pants, and it's very clear that this man just peed his pants.
yeah.
And
He has a he doesn't wash his hands either. Just leave.
no, he just walks out, and and Dick Jones and Bob Morton have this kind of back and forth, and it's very clear that Dick Jones is just like, hey, like, back in my day, we would call people, all these different names, but we had respect for our elders or like the people up, and you don't have any respect. And Dick Jones is just like, oh, or Bob Morton's just like, oh, fuck off, I don't care. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, I'm in the CEO's good graces. You can't do anything about it.
That scene's also very homoerotic, by the way, because Dick Jones like touches his face and stuff, touches Bob Morton's face,
Yeah.
like they're in the bathroom and he's like touching it and stuff. There's
It,
something kind of weird. Like there's no reason for that. Like, it doesn't like play in or anything. I think he's just trying to like emasculate him, or just trying to make him feel like he's better or something like that. Trying to maybe like make Bob Morton more nervous or something.
Mhm.
It's weird, but like I wouldn't have it any other way. Like it's
Yeah, it's a strange scene. And then we cut back to RoboCop sleeping. Is this the scene where he's
it's his dream.
yeah? And RoboCop has there's basically like this little EKG that these two scientists are not really paying attention to,
Yeah.
and it shows like basic wave patterns, and then we see RoboCop sort of having this dream about being killed. Right, you kind of
Mhm.
see like quick flashbacks of the different people shooting him, um, you know, back and forth, and you can see like the EKG just like jumping up and down. And by the time the scientists figure out what's going on, RoboCop is up and he's just like pushing past all of them.
Yeah, and they're just like, "What's he doing? I don't know." And he leaves, and as he's leaving the police precinct, he runs into Anne, and Anne's like, "Hey, how are you? I'm Anne. Do you know who you are? You're Murphy." And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, "Okay, Murphy." You know what I mean? He kind of like remembers it.
Yeah.
And RoboCop, leaves the police precinct. Um, they get mad at Anne for some reason. They're like, "Ah, Anne," da, 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 da. And they get mad at the police chief too. Bob Morton shows up and he's like, "Look, RoboCop is a product. Like, he's not yours. He's barely even like a cop. You know what I mean? He's like
Yeah.
a product, a thing that we need for my career, basically." Like Bob Morton, even though RoboCop is very effective and works very well,
Yeah.
Bob Morton comes across as very selfish throughout the entire movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because he's just a careerist. He just wants to like get ahead. So if this thing will get ahead, then sure, why not? Like, he doesn't really care too much about like how people feel.
No, not at all.
What RoboCop, he's just more concerned with it working and making him look good.
Hmm.
And yeah, he gets like mad at everyone, and RoboCop then goes randomly to a gas station.
Yeah, he's like driving by. It's not clear where he's going.
Oh yeah, he's like crime. Yeah.
And one of the bad guys who we met earlier, one of the people that killed Murphy, is robbing this gas station. Um, and so like he's taking all the money and he's filling his tank with gas. And RoboCop comes up, and of course he's like, stop, or you know, I'll have to arrest you or whatever. and he goes to shoot the guy because
Mhm.
I think the guy shoots RoboCop a couple of times,
Yeah, he does.
and so he goes to shoot him back, but like he like has like a flashback, or it's almost like a glitch because like he recognizes oh no, because the bad guy says, the bad guy immediately recognizes Murphy, which is amazing that like most of the precinct does not recognize Murphy.
Yeah, it's kind of yeah. He says, I think he says something to him.
Yeah, he says, I killed you.
Well, I think Murphy says something to the guy too that makes him. I think he says something like, "You're coming with me, dead or alive," which
Yes,
is what he
that's
said.
right, which is what he said earlier in the movie. And so the guy figures out that it's Murphy. Again, another just like little thing that just ties everything together.
Yeah.
And so this bad guy's freaking out because he's basically seeing a dead guy walking now as a robot. And the during this conversation, RoboCop has recorded it, and so like he's watching it back, and he's like kind of confused because he's like, I don't, because again, there's like kind of this like he kind of recognizes that he's Murphy, but it's like not like consciously there. And so the guy, he basically the fuel tank breaks. The bad guy lights a lighter and throws it off, and of course, as in all of this director's films, giant explosion, just an
Station.
obnoxiously large explosion.
It's great. Yeah. RoboCop. The guy gets away. The guy gets away in his motorcycle. And
Mhm.
RoboCop, of course, is fine. And I think he shoots at the motorcycle,
Yeah,
which I love the motorcycle crash. By the way, when he crashes into the car, he like flings so fast,
yeah.
like whoever that was.
Hmm.
And I think RoboCop just like goes up to him and he's like, "Okay, who are you? Like, I'm confused. Like, what's going on here?" And I think he just, for some reason, instead of like taking him in or doing anything, he kind of just leaves him just because like he's unconscious, and I think he just doesn't want to like. I think he's just like, I have bigger fish to fry than like, I don't know, deal with this guy. So he just kind of like leaves him.
Hmm.
He goes to like a police, I guess, like record place.
Yeah.
I like it too. He has like in order to like, I don't know, for some reason access computers, he has a giant
Giant
pointy,
spike.
yeah, giant spike that comes out of his hand. Um, yeah, like, and there's like a cop who's like, "You're not supposed to be in here," and he like takes the spike out. He's like plugs it into the computer, and basically he finds out like, who the guy he saw was, who the people he's involved with are, which are the people that killed him.
Mhm.
Finds out that like the main guy, yes, is like wanted for killing him, Murphy, and he finds out about Murphy through that. So he just kind of, with the computer records, is able to find out like, oh, okay, this is my address, and he goes to his old house.
Yes, which I think is a really interesting. I think one of the interesting things about this film is we really see almost no interactions between Murphy and his family up
Yeah,
until this point.
yeah.
Like you see there's like one shot of the woman where she says, I need to tell you something, of his wife saying, I need to tell you something. There's one shot of his kid watching this TV show,
Mhm.
and there's a shot of him driving away from his family. But that's pretty much it. Like those are the only shot. There's never like any, scenes of them like sitting at the table, like eating dinner or anything like that.
There are no, um, I don't think there are any scenes where you see Peter Weller with his family. There's like a picture, if you think about it, right?
Yeah.
You just see the one. There is a picture that they take while like on Halloween that they,
Hmm.
it's from the perspective of him.
Yeah.
They take a picture and then you see the picture and they're all together. But yeah, it's Peter Weller, RoboCop going through his own house, which is empty. They obviously moved out because he died, and they left. Um, and like you said, he's having flashbacks of all these different like little memories of his wife and his kid,
Mhm.
that he basically can't make sense of. Like he just doesn't, he doesn't understand. Like, I guess this was me. I don't know why I'm remembering all these things. Like he's just kind of confused and angry, like I don't know, like a child almost.
Yeah, yeah. And so as he walks through the house, there's like each room has like a different memory in it. And so like each time he'll remember this or remember that. And again, it's as you said, it's all from his perspective. You never really see him with his family, which is just another fascinating choice to never sort of show that bond. It's all in his head, sort of.
Mhm.
And we get the where he walks into the bedroom, and we kind of cut back to the scene that we saw earlier where his wife ran up to him and said, hey, I need to tell you something. And the thing that she needed to tell him was, of course, that she loved him.
Mhm.
And it's actually, for a film that I would say is pretty comedic and dark, and not and I would say often not very interested in emotions. I
Like
think this is,
stuff or
yeah,
romance or
yeah. I think
yep.
this is a pretty genuine moment. And I think it really could have gone off as saccharine, especially because Robocop is such a because as you said, it is so over the top at it feels almost ironic in a certain sense. I think it would have been very easy to make this scene feel disingenuous or like feel, just kind of like saccharine or kind of pointless. And I think they walk that line very well. And I think that has a lot to do with our actor Peter here, who just again just an incredible performance, who's able to like show this incredible amount of anger and sadness and just confusion all at the same time. Again, without seeing most of his face, just incredible.
Yeah, insane. Just yeah, yeah. It kind of sucks because Pierre Weller's very good. He's been in some other movies I've seen him in, but like just kind of like a guy who just didn't really like get the same take off like somebody like Arnold or
Yeah.
Sylvester Stallone or something like that. Just not the same kind of, I guess, super famous level.
Mhm.
He plays William Burroughs in Naked Lunch, the David Cronenberg
Yeah.
directed adaptation. And he's very good in that movie. He's like very funny in that movie. But yeah, it just kind of sucks because he's very good. He's a very good actor.
Absolutely.
It's really good though. I wouldn't say that there's like one performance where I'm like, oh yeah, that was bad, or we didn't need that.
Mhm.
Everything's
Yeah. And so the next scene is Dick Jones at his house, right?
good. He goes to the club first and beats up Ray Wise.
That's right. Which is the guy from Twin Peaks.
I believe that the guy too, but isn't Bob Morton also in Twin Peaks?
I think so. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
A lot of I love Ray Wise. He's very, very good. I love. He's in tons of stuff, and yeah,
Yeah.
he's very funny, and his like his facial expressions are crazy. He just, especially in the club scene.
Hmm.
But yeah, he shows up and he beats up Ray Wise because I think he needs to know where they are or something. You know where they're
He needs
based.
to know where Clarence is. Yeah,
Yeah, and then we get the scene with Bob Morton at his house,
that's
which
right.
is a funny scene.
Yeah.
Funny, you know.
So, and just going back to that club scene for a moment, I think just another incredible performance by everyone involved. And I really wish we would have got more of that. I don't know what his bad guy name was. I don't think it really matters. But I wish we would have got more of him because he's just, even though like, yeah, Ray Wise is, even though he's only in, he's only in like 3 or 4 scenes, like the amount of effort he puts into like the few moments he's in, like even though his smart part's really small, is just incredible. And I really wish we could have got more of him because he's just, I love his performance. I love the actor. I think everything about it was absolutely incredible.
Yeah,
But
and in that scene too, another Easter egg in that scene too is that right after I think RoboCop encounters Ray Wise, there's like there's actually a very very quick shot of Paul Verhoeven in front of the camera, and he's like doing a dance. I don't know if you saw that.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, it's like I think it's like a shot of him teaching like the actors like how to dance or something like that. Like he's telling them how he wants them to dance or something like that. For some reason, they decided to put that shot in with that sequence of the club of him. He's like looking like very like manic, or like he looks like a maniac. He's like, he's like, but it's like it's like literally for like 1 second. For
Yeah.
some reason, that's in there, but whatever. I guess it's like it doesn't detract anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fun.
So then our next scene, we mentioned earlier, is Bob Morton. He's at his house with what seem to be strippers, hookers, prostitutes, something of that nature. And yeah, classic, executive doing the cocaine, uh, clearly about to, have a fun time with these women. When Clarence, does Clarence just come in, or is he not? I think he just comes in, doesn't he? Does he knock on the door?
Yeah, he knocks on the door, and
Yeah.
yeah, he opens it up, and yeah, it's Clarence.
And
He's like, what does he say? He says, "Bitches leave," and then
they just leave.
they just leave, and then it's discovered through this. He plays like a video disc or DVD or whatever. I don't know what it is on his television. It's discovered like, oh, okay, Clarence and Dick Jones are working together.
Yeah, it seems that Dick Jones funds, which I guess I don't exactly understand.
It's
I,
just, I think, yeah,
I guess
I,
yeah, yeah,
I think it's just the idea that like these executives are so greedy and evil, they're involved in the whole business, you know what I mean? They're involved in the development, stuff that everybody knows about, you know what I mean? Their weapons and their
yeah,
buildings and their policing and stuff like that, but they're also involved with the criminal stuff, with like drugs and stuff, because that also makes a lot of money. If you can get involved in both sides, why wouldn't you? I
yeah.
think that's just kind of the idea. Like, you don't really like know too much about Clarence and Dick's relationship.
Hmm.
You just know that they're, I guess, they're basically business partners.
Yeah. And I guess it also makes sense because it's kind of like cyclical, because like right, he pays for this or like he makes money from this, selling drugs and these kind of underground institutions, and then he also
Mhm.
gets money by creating military, right? That's supposed to kill it. So like he just, as you were saying, he kind of makes money from both ends. So he's just constantly, in the cycle of making money.
Like, oh, there's a lot of crime. We need to make more, robot
Yeah.
technology to go after it to get more crime. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then he protects the criminals. He busts them out of jail, and so
Yeah.
it's good.
And and then in this scene, this is where Clarence basically again, another explosion, explodes Bob Morton's house with Bob Morton in it.
Yeah, yeah. He's just like, you shouldn't mess with me. Bye. And then yeah, after that, yeah. So Bob Morton, he died, of course. He blew up.
Oh, one last thing about the scene that I thought was really interesting that I didn't entirely understand, and it kind of still like I'm still like thinking about it and still intrigued by it, is when they're in the house. Bob Morton, of course, is like pleading with him and begging, and he even offers to double whatever Dick Jones is paying for it. And Clarence is just like, no. Like, I don't know if that's because like Clarence is loyal or if it's just like, he follows his word or whatever it is. But I think that's a really interesting moment because, you know, it'd be very easy to just be like, oh, I'll pay you twice as much. And Clarence would just be like, yeah, I'll take twice the money. Like, I don't have any, you know, ties to anybody. I think it's interesting that he chooses to go through with this. And
Yeah.
I'm not really sure why.
I think it's also because Dick Jones is just at this point has a little bit more power than Bob does. He's second in command of the company. So I
Yeah.
think the power aspect is also something that he probably values a little bit more than
Hmm.
money in the long run.
Hmm.
And then you get the cocaine factory scene.
So, so they're putting cocaine into like bottles of, like, it's almost like it's basically, it's literally a like factory. It's like there's like a conveyor belt and they're just putting it into like bottles, which is, I've never seen it,
Either.
which is, it's really quirky and fun. And Clarence is, talking with all the bad guys, and is that when RoboCop shows up?
Yeah, Clarence for some reason he's talking to like the guy who owns it or operates it, and he's like this kind of like just this
Yeah.
schlubby guy, this
Mhm.
bald schlubby guy, and for some reason he's drinking wine. Do you remember that scene? They're like kind of talking about business,
Yes. Yeah, they're like sitting. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
Hmm.
like yeah, he's like drinking wine, and for some reason Clarence like dips his fingers in there and he like sniffs it. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I don't know why he does that.
I think yeah, it's just like I think I read that like I think I read Paul Verhoeven said I think Paul Verhoeven likes when his, wants his actors to I guess what's the word improv. Uh,
Hmm.
so I think that was like an improvisational thing where it's just kind of like it literally there's no it's so weird. He like dips his fingers in the guy's wine, he sniffs it, and then the guy starts continues to drink his wine as if like this guy didn't just like dip his fingers in it. Yeah, it's like so weird, but it's just so memorable and it sticks out of my mind. And I guess it says a lot about Clarence too. You know what I mean? How like weird he is and kind of I
Hmm.
guess strange he is.
Yeah.
But yeah, they like have an argument, guns, and then Robocop shows up, which is what is really important, and he
Yeah.
fucking kills everyone. Kind of,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
he's effective.
Yeah. He basically walks in there and there's like 50 people shooting at him. And again, RoboCop's just standing there, just like, pretty much invincible. And he just starts killing people left and right.
He just kind of walks through and he's just
Yeah. Just like very, um, it's not like, it's not a traditional action scene in the sense it's not like people like jumping around, hiding, kind of like, it's just like very,
but he's still effective. You know, I think
yeah, yeah,
it's
it's very effective and very mechanical, I guess you could describe it, especially in the performance, right? It's just like, him there, him there, him there, just kind of like shooting people down basically is, fish in a barrel, I guess.
mhm. And then yeah, he gets Clarence, and I love this part of the movie. He's basically just haranguing him. He throws him through three windows
Yep.
and he's able to get a recording of him saying like, "I work with Dick Jones, he's second guy." You know, he just kind of like he basically sells us. You know, he
Yeah.
basically sells out Dick Jones
Immediately.
immediately. Yeah, because I mean, yeah, RoboCop throws him through three. It's just so like that decision to just be like, okay, we're gonna throw him through three windows is just so funny to me. I love that. That's just so funny. And yeah, he takes Clarence and he takes him to
The police station.
yeah, he takes him to the police station, and he's just like, yeah, he's a cop killer. And I think he calls Dick Jones, and Dick Jones is like, okay, yeah, I'll bust you out of there. I'll get you out of there. Don't worry about it. And then I think more or less, RoboCop is like, I'm gonna get Dick Jones
Mhm.
because he's an accomplice to the. And he goes up to his office, and he's like, and Dick Jones is like, okay, you can arrest me, and then something's wrong. RoboCop can't do it.
And
He's
that's, yeah.
he's what do I do? Yeah.
That's where we learn about, of course, Directive 4, which Directive 4 is that you cannot arrest or injure any executive at the company.
Yep.
So RoboCop's like struggling, like he really wants to arrest this guy or kill him, or at least do something, and he just can't. He can't.
Yep. And he has a SCP. Wait, SCP? Is that what it is? No, I'm thinking of something else. I think it's BD 209. Yeah,
Yes.
he has a BD 209 after him. Oh, ED. Uh, and it's once again useless. It's able to like beat him up pretty well, like
Yeah.
just mess him up. But he's able to defeat it by going down the stairs.
Yeah. That I think like the fight up to that point is kind of fun, but like the fact that he just walks downstairs and that's how he defeats this mech.
That's fun. I think
It's
that's really
funny.
funny.
It's funny.
Also, just kind of like, oh yeah, I guess they didn't think about this. Like they didn't think about like when it was designed, they didn't think about stairs. You know what I mean? They just were like, we need a big robot thing, and
Yeah.
they didn't think about like it going down the stairs.
Yeah.
I just think that's a funny little thing.
It's
But
it's
I
a,
know what you
it's a
mean. I
silly
guess.
moment. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's defeated, and then RoboCop runs away, but there are SWAT people there
Hmm.
going to shoot it. And I think there are cops there too, and the cops are like, "No, he's a cop," and they're like, "No, we have to shoot it." But the
Yeah.
SWAT cops are like, "No, we have to kill it."
Yeah.
They shoot him up, um, and he's able to escape with Anne. They're able to drive away, and I think they drive to the original location where he died, the steel mill, the steel
Yep.
factory, whatever it is.
And and that's I would say that's the only moment when they're at the steel factory. Of course, very reminiscent of Terminator 2 when they are. It reminds me a lot of the scene in Terminator 2 where they take his, like, they peel back his skull. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like very reminiscent of that scene, and that like it's this quiet moment. It's especially for this film, it's the first moment that's kind of like
Yeah.
chill, quiet, and he basically like takes off all of his like helmet and all this stuff. And another, I think of all the designs, this is my favorite one,
Yeah.
where it's like his face, like his actual face, but then like the rest of him is like this gruesome, not maybe not gruesome, but like this robotic figure. It's absolutely incredible, and it looks like his face, even though like obviously they must have like pinched like around his face because it looks like almost like a layer of skin is like placed on top. It's incredible.
Looks great. I don't know how they did it, but
I don't know.
it's yeah, it looks very very good. Like his face without the helmet. And yeah, he basically just kind of like fixed himself up a little bit. Before that scene though, too, I'm just kind of dial back a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Dick and Clarence have their meeting about what Clarence ought to do. So yeah, Dick is like mad at Clarence. He's like, "You sold me out, but so you need to kill him. I can give you whatever you want. I'll give you the tracking device, and I'll give you whatever weapons you want. Um, and in return, when we start construction of Delta City, there's going to be a lot more people here. So that means like more crimes can be committed, like gambling and prostitution, and you can do whatever you want in that regard." And Clarence right away is just like, "Okay, sounds good. Well, I'll do it." And yeah, right after the steel mill scene, it shows like the bad guys. Uh, they have like these like giant rifles, like that shoot like they're like tank
Yeah.
cannons, and they're just driving around this storefront, and they're blowing up like buildings and cars and stuff
So
like
many
that.
explosions.
Yeah, a lot of explosions, and they're just they're feeling really happy about it, and
Mhm.
yeah, they decide to now go to the steel mill to get RoboCop and kill him
Mhm.
with their big giant guns, and then you get the final steel mill battle or whatever, which is very good to see.
Yeah, it's I love the steel mill scene. And so they get to the steel mill and they're kind of like, they got their giant grenade launcher, rocket launcher, whatever these things are. Um, and RoboCop is like at the top of the steel mill and they're like on the ground. And he throws like a piece of metal or something like to the side, and they all freak out and they shoot these giant grenade launchers at just this piece of metal, which is just like, I think why I love that moment so much is because it's clearly reminiscent of action films of the time where like someone would throw something and they would shoot like their handgun, and just the absurdity of doing that with a grenade launcher.
All have these giant rifles. It's so funny. It's so Yeah, it's very absurd. It's just over the top in terms of just like, yeah, what you could think of, like what the bad guys can have that have to shoot at the good guy. It's so funny.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's just a great scene. You know, they're driving around. Anne, of course, is there, and she's she's trying to chase Clarence. I think he's driving away. Um, and then yeah, one of the guys at the guy at the gas station, he's in the van. I love this part. He tries to drive over RoboCop. He gets out of the way and he drives through like a toxic waste vat.
Yeah.
And he exits out of the back of the vehicle, and
Oh
he's
my God.
basically what I can only describe as a toxic waste man. He's like disfigured and melted, and he's like he's like kill me. Like,
Is
no,
one
yeah,
of the most terrifying thing. I mean, he has like skin hanging off him. His like face is all like dysmorphed. And I mean, there's really no like reason this has to be in the film at all. Like it doesn't like there's no like logic to it or anything. It's just clearly like something that our director wanted to like he just wanted to have it. And it's just
yeah,
horrific. And
yeah, yeah. So like I said, the MPAA took issue with a lot of stuff, and they took issue with this. But apparently, everyone involved with the movie, including the studio, refused to remove or change the scene because it rated really, really well during test screenings. Like, viewers loved that part of the movie, even though it is like very like gruesome and violent and kind of like scary.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, they were just like, no, it at every test screening they love it. Like we're not changing it, and they're like, okay, whatever. Yeah, it's so good. Yeah, and yeah, and he goes up to Ray Wise and he's like, please help me. And Ray Wise, he's like, he's super expression, like his expression's crazy, and he's like, get off of me. And then yeah, eventually like Clarence is driving around and he he hits the guy, Emil, I think his name is.
Yeah.
And just I love it. He like hits him and there's like liquid all over his
Yes.
like windshield. He's like shit. So funny. It's like yeah, it's like terrifying, but I don't know why. I just laugh every time.
Yeah. It's so strange and funny and just weird.
It's creative, very creative.
Yeah, very
They
creative.
had to make him look like that, and they did a good job.
Hmm. So Robocop goes and he's, killing him off one by one. Eventually he gets to Clarence because Clarence crashes the van after he hits, right?
Toxic waste man. Yeah.
Toxic waste.
He crashes his car, and yeah, he and Anne are like fighting, and then Clarence is able to like shoot at Anne a couple of times, and then RoboCop comes in before she's able to get killed.
Mhm.
But Wise, he goes up to like they're like on the low ground, and
That's
he's
right. And he's like on he has like a crane and he like is moving the crane around and RoboCop and um, Clarence are like they're not shooting at each other. It's like this threatening moment of like
we're
who's gonna
towards Clarence.
yeah. And Ray Wise drops just like this giant
Like
thing of metal.
yeah,
Yeah, and
like on
it,
top of RoboCop.
yeah, and it just like crushes RoboCop. And of course, right as he drops it, and shoots one of the grenades or rocket launchers, whatever, right into the crane, exploding Ray Wise.
Yep, yep. And yeah, Clarence, he like gets a pole and he like stabs RoboCop.
Mhm.
They're in a fight, um, and then comes into play the spike.
Yes,
Stabs
that's right.
Clarence in the neck, gets him. He dies pretty much. Defeats him that way. Good, effective, makes sense. Just yeah, we know he has the thing and he's able to use it. He can't shoot because he's on top of all this. This metal's all on top of him.
Hmm.
And then we get to the final scene of the movie. RoboCop pushes the metal off, and we get the final scene of the movie back at the board meeting. Well, yeah, the executive meeting
Yeah.
room, the OCP building. Yeah, like basically Dick is just kind of like, ED209 is awesome. We should be doing that, and everyone's like, okay, yeah, I guess we don't know what RoboCop is, and Bob died. So he's like, Yeah, I even have an ED209 like protecting the building right now, the front of the building. And Robocop, he drives up, gets one of those guns and shoots it at ED209. Just
Just immediately destroys it.
immediately destroys it, walks in the building, of course. Just so awesome. Gets up to the meeting room and he's like, "Yeah, Dick, he's like a horrible criminal."
Yeah, and they play the video of Dick Jones. Or wait, no, they played a video of Clarence admitting that Dick Jones is
At the meeting, he plays the Robocop plays the video of Dick admitting to killing Bob Morgan.
okay. Gotcha. Yeah.
Yep. And then yeah, so right away everyone's like, okay. And Dick, he gets a gun. He gets the CEO,
Mhm.
and he's like, I want a chopper, da, 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 da. And he's like, he's trying to target. He can't do anything though, of course, because he works there.
Mhm.
And then really, it's a brilliant solution where
Yeah.
he grabs his boss
Uh-huh.
and he's threatening to kill him, and his boss is like, "You're fired." And right away, I guess
Yeah.
right away that gives Robocop the ability to shoot him. So the boss gets away and he shoots him, uh, Dick, because he's got a gun, and he falls out of the building. That effect probably is the worst effect of the movie, by the way.
What, the one of him falling? Yeah. You see like his arms, they're like super long for some reason and
Yeah,
like stretchy.
yeah, not my favorite effect. They could
Yeah.
have done something a little bit better, like
I
a
mean,
dive or something like that.
yeah. Or just like show him falling out the window. You don't have to show him like falling down the
I'm
building.
okay I like him. That's like a classic '80s action thing, of like the
Yeah.
bad guy, like no.
Yeah.
uh, and then yeah, the boss is like, "Oh, nice shooting. What's your name?" And Robocop, he turns and he's like, "Murphy." And then that's the end of the movie.
It's the end of the movie.
Perfect ending. It's really a movie. Really, when you chalk it up, it's really a movie about, like, I guess, finding one's humanity. That's kind of the arc of Robocop, is that, like, he was one guy and then he became a product, a robot. Um, but through just little reminders and things like that, he's able to determine, like, okay, I was this person pretty much. Like, it's at least like a part of me.
Yeah.
He recognizes it, and he kind of recognizes the humanity within himself. Um, I also like the irony of Robocop too. The irony of Robocop is that, like, he's almost too good at his job,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Because OCP doesn't care about policing, really.
Right.
They care about looking good, but Robocop is like an effective policeman, if you think about it. I guess. I mean, he's devoid of any human feeling. You know what I mean? Like, I have contacted a rape crisis center. He isn't like, "Oh, are you okay?" He's like,
Yeah.
So I guess in that regard, he is not effective. But I guess as, like, policing crime, violent crime, or whatever, I guess he is. But it's funny just because it's like he's so good now that he's now getting involved in matters that affect the company, right? So it's
Yeah.
like it's kind of ironic, but
Mhm.
it's yeah, yeah.
So you've talked about how perfect this film is. Out of 10, what would you give this film?
Well, of course, you got to give it a 10. I really do think it's a perfect movie. It completely effectively does everything that it's trying to do. I could go on and on about it. We've talked a lot about it, of course, but it's just, I don't know, like, the writing, just everything is super efficient, super, well done. But it's not like it's efficient, but it's not devoid of any personality. It has a lot of personality. It has a lot of weird quirks from its actors and its writing. It's extremely funny, maybe one of the funniest movies. Seriously, it's just so good. But the action's great, the violence is great, the effects are good. It's just, for me, it's just kind of like the ideal, action movie, in that it's just more than just like a movie about, like, a robot cop that shoots and defeats people.
Mhm.
It's a little bit more than that, but that part of the movie is also very good. So yeah, I just don't. It's really hard for me to, like, point out anything specifically wrong with it, in my opinion. But
Mhm.
yeah,
I enjoyed the film. I've been hesitant to watch this film for a long time because it always seemed very silly to me. And
Hmm.
I guess like when I was younger, I didn't realize that it was kind of intentional, that sort of tongue in cheek sort of action. Like I just thought it was kind of, at the time or when I was younger, I just thought it was like one of those big, 80s blockbusters and just kind of cheesy because 80s blockbusters were cheesy.
Hmm.
But coming at it from the perspective of knowing a lot more about it and knowing kind of, and having watched it and knowing that the cheesiness is intentional and there's a sort of ironic layer to it. And, kind of as you said earlier, really the dumbest person in the room or the smartest person in the room can both enjoy this film, perhaps for different reasons, but, find a lot of joy out of it. And it reminded me lot of great action movies and perhaps action movies I'm not entirely a fan of. They remind
Hmm.
me a lot of the Terminator, which I think this is definitely better than the Terminator, just because I don't think Terminator really has much to say, and I think it kind of celebrates violence in a way that, even ironically, even though this film is very violent, I don't think this film actually celebrates violence in a certain sense. I think it's sort of I think it's supposed to kind of be like, yes, it's a very violent film and certainly more violent than the Terminator in a lot of ways, but I think because it's over the top, it's purposeful, and it's saying like, look, like violence, not the greatest thing in the world.
Hmm.
But also watching this, I was reminded of films like Blade Runner. And
That's funny you say that actually, because
really,
I believe that the screenwriter was very influenced by Blade Runner.
that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of Blade Runner-esque aspects to this. And the thing is when I was reminded of Blade Runner when I watched this, I kept thinking Blade Runner is a much better movie. And I do think Blade Runner is a much better movie than this. I think this film has some incredible prosthetics. I find a lot of the action scenes, honestly, again, we talked about how Robocop's kind of invincible, which
Hmm.
lowers the stakes in a certain sense. I also find the action scenes, even when he's human, to be kind of boring. Like when we talk about the shootout scene of them driving, like when he's in the cop car with Anne and the van scenes in front of him. I don't think that scene is very well. I don't think it's very interesting as an action scene. It just feels like, you put a camera in front of people shooting and in front of a camera of other people shooting. It doesn't feel very motivated. The camera doesn't move out. I don't find it that interesting. And maybe part of it is just I'm not a huge action fan. It's hard for me to get into action movies. Um, I also found the film to be, and I know this is partly intentional, it's silly. And I know it's silly and it's funny. And I laughed a lot in this film and I really enjoyed that. But to me, it was silly to the point of losing some, like, it was almost irritating. Like some of the charm to me was lost. So I enjoyed this film a lot more than I thought I would. So I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10, which I know is not Andrew's. I know. Actually, after watching this, I actually have more respect for Total Recall. I think now, having watched both, I think Total Recall is better, actually.
Good. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, because
For me, Total Recall is just a little bit less.
mhm.
I enjoy Total Recall a little bit less than RoboCop, but I still love it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think honestly, oddly enough, watching this movie, I gained a lot of respect for Total Recall. Because, like I said, when I first watched Total Recall, I don't think I loved it. Um, but after watching this, for some reason, like I really admire Total Recall in the way that I didn't before. And I still think like Robocop is very good for a lot of reasons. I think, the effects are incredible and just magnificent. And, if this film came out today, other than a couple of effects, you really wouldn't know the difference. It's absolutely incredible. I think the tone for me is just, I don't know, it's just a little too silly for me.
That's fine. I'm 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 a RoboCop. I'm a Paul Verhoeven fan. So you were talking about Blade Runner and Terminator. We disagreed on Terminator. I think that movie is also perfect. But I like that movie for different reasons than RoboCop.
Yeah,
Terminator is much more serious.
yeah.
Um, and instead of RoboCop, and like both movies are actually very similar, I think, except Terminator is a villain and RoboCop is a hero.
Hmm.
Um, RoboCop has and I love both movies for very different reasons. And Blade Runner too, um, I'm also a big Blade Runner fan, and there's definitely Blade Runner influence in this stuff. But for me, Blade Runner, comparing Blade Runner and RoboCop, I like Blade Runner, but I think I like RoboCop way more. You talked about like there are scenes in Blade Runner. It's been a while since I've seen it,
Yeah.
um, but I just remember like there being scenes in Blade Runner that made me want to sleep. Like there are really slow, boring scenes in that movie.
It's yeah.
And the other problem with Blade Runner is that Harrison Ford is just fine in the movie, I think, while Rutger Hauer is like amazing
Uh-huh.
in that movie. So that's the problems with it. Briefly talking about Blade Runner, just because but it's been a while since I've seen it.
Yeah.
RoboCop to me is just like I said, just completely efficient. Everyone is good in it. Everyone plays their part perfectly. Everything is just completely fine tuned to just a degree that is just so satisfying to watch. But yeah, the comedy definitely is a little like, if you're not expecting it, it's very like, what is going on? I would recommend. This might not be a podcast movie since we just watched RoboCop,
Yeah.
but you should also probably watch Starship Troopers,
Yeah.
which is basically like the third of his trifecta science fiction movies.
Yeah.
That's his movie. I've talked to you about this movie before, but yeah, it's like it's his movie about fascism and kind of like war and violence, of course. And there are other like he puts like news segments in that movie too that are really funny. That movie's also very silly. It comes across as very like kind of parodying things, you know what I mean? So including like 90210 type dramas and stuff like that, which you which if you thought RoboCop was silly, Starship Troopers might even come across as even more like, okay, like the tone, it's kind of weird, but I love it just because like there's nothing like it, and yeah, but I see what you mean, but yeah, I love it.
Well, thank you all for listening. I'm Austinlugo.
I'm Andrew Harp.
You can find me anywhere at Austinlugo12.
You can find me at adharp24.
And please like, subscribe, and review us wherever you hear your podcasts.
Thanks for listening, guys.